Mysticism, by its definition, describes an array of phenomena hard to put into words. It is the encounter with the ineffable. It is also largely subjective. An experience may be mystical to one person but not another. Someone may see the significance of a sign or an event that to the next person is rather meaningless. However, to suggest that it is only subjective or only limited to certain people or practices would be an incorrect assumption. Although we are dealing with an inordinate number of possible mystical phenomena, there is a thread of variability connecting the concept of mysticism itself to biological or anatomical technologies in any given organism. To clarify, humans have a built-in process for what we call mystical experiences, and as we will see shortly, one that is used fundamentally for survival. It is true enough that a definition on such a topic can have a great deal of interpretation. Overall, I think that the following provides the most accurate and encompassing understanding, which considers the most ancient shamanism, the religious, alchemical, dreams, mythological, fairy tales, fantasy, and sci-fi experiences, as well as natural biology. Another way to look at this is contained within and inspiring all of these storytelling mediums is the influence, whether conscious or subconscious, of ultraviolet light, and generally microbial and cellular processes, which is something I have brought up before. From the oldest shamans to religious depictions to futuristic sci-fi stories, they are all based on the same kind of experience, which is ultraviolet radiation and microbial and cellular activity, which is most often the scale of radiation we are dealing with. Nowhere do we see more of this same kind of storytelling than in dreams. Indeed, it may be useful to not even distinguish fact and fiction, which is a false dichotomy. Certainly nothing microscopic can be dissociated into fact versus fiction. We have explored many times before how the ability to see phosphenes was a prerequisite to becoming a shaman or healer in every culture on Earth, whether the light was interpreted as spirits, ancestors, some kind of divine light, angels, or other supernatural-esque phenomena. The same is true for meditative traditions of healing in religion and alchemy found equally across the world. Healing light is obvious in its use in fantasy magic and holy themes, and sci-fi is no different, from psionic powers to laser technology and space battles. They are all inspired and express cellular and microbial activity, most especially of ultraviolet radiation, what we can call collectively as mysticism. One of the fundamental hallmarks of infection, something we have all experienced, is the response of a fever, part of the body's primary defense mechanism for invaders. Those familiar with the innervation or map of consciousness chart will find that the fever response is a highly sympathetic action, one that causes the entire body, save for the digestive and reproductive systems, to be innervated or energized with nerve activity. Hence, why when you are sick, food does not appeal to you and the gut seems to deactivate for a while. That is a consequence of the sympathetic nervous system. The accepted understanding of a fever is the use of heat to suppress or destroy the infection. This is completely wrong for several important reasons. Walking through the process, when an infection is detected, the hypothalamus releases chemicals called pyrogens, which turn up the temperature of the body through the sympathetic activation. All the muscles spasm or contract to build up heat. This is the cause of rising temperatures and the reason for shaking and feeling cold that results from constant heat buildup and loss during a fever. The resting temperature of the human is about 98 degrees, and fever is usually anything 100 degrees or higher, with dangerous temperatures starting around a prolonged period of 105 degrees or above. There are very few microorganisms that are stable at 98 degrees and suddenly dying off at, say, 102 degrees. The popular idea that goes around stating mammalian temperatures being too hot for most microorganisms to survive is entirely made up. There is no basis for this. For one, the number of different species in a human can range from 10,000 to 100,000, and easily 40 trillion total microbial cells. Furthermore, it is not the same 10,000 in every human. Many are seasonal and geographically based, diet-based, and so on. Adding on to this, some are there only daily, depending on what we do or where we go or what we eat. Many of the infectious microbes that make us sick already live in us and only become pathogenic when they are brought out of their usual commensal location in the body to a foreign place in the body. If the germicidal activity of a fever comes from the rise in temperature, we would expect the entire microbiome to suffer during this event. This would cause such an extreme Herx reaction or die-off that the host itself, the human, would perish with every fever. But maybe the most obvious indication is pasteurization. Cooking or boiling of food to remove microbes occurs at temperatures well above 140 degrees, what no human could survive internally. The food we eat is often the most common source of infectious microbes. How is it that you have to boil the food at 200 degrees, but that same microbe infecting you suddenly is suppressed at 103 degrees in a fever? So if heat is not the primary purpose of a fever, what is? The answer is ultraviolet radiation. With the innervation of every cell in the body, the deployment of white blood cells, and the contraction of muscles, these all contribute to the internal generation of ultraviolet light. For the chills and shakes of the muscles, imagine a similar luminescence you get from ripping two strips of duct tape. In other words, it's a mechanical or frictional activation of light. The muscles contract around the fascia, which causes the emission or discharge of biophotons. White blood cells are also emitting biophotons. Ultraviolet radiation has germicidal activity in the 200 to 300 nanometer range. This is the same range of ultraviolet radiation produced as biophotons by the fascia and by white blood cells and other processes within the body. Meaning, in order to fight an infection, the body uses the most efficient method of killing invading pathogens: direct contact with lasers. This is also what makes the sun germicidal. It is precise, targeted, offers the least collateral damage, and can destroy the most variety of pathogens, as biophotons can emit light in the 200 to 800 nanometer range, whatever is most effective to fight the current infection. Now you might be able to see the range of storytelling that expresses this, from shamans using healing light, to laser weapons in sci-fi battles, healing magic, alchemy, and religious holy light, and so on. Because everyone who has ever had a fever has had a mystical experience. The entire body from the inside is generating and bathing itself in ultraviolet radiation. It is the same process that occurs during a mystic meditation, a trance, or a psychedelic trip. Of course, the circumstances are different. The fever is occurring during an infection and is much less pleasant than a meditative trance, for example. But both involve the generation of ultraviolet light in order to cause some sort of change. Ultraviolet light is mystical because knowledge can be encoded, magnetic fields can be altered, the laws or behaviors of certain things can be changed. And this is true whether it's internal ultraviolet light or external. The sunset and sunrise can be mystical, as can a fever, as can a foggy day, or the reflection of light off of a surface. As stated at the beginning, the number of possible phenomena that mysticism can incur is endless, but the thread of mysticism is ultraviolet light.